Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to a breakout session. You got a little bit of a preview of what we're going to discuss this morning during Iago and Cristiano's commentary around how to streamline test and validation process and really accelerate deployments. So we're going to start with some joint presentations from TIP and ORAN, then we're going to segue into a panel discussion that's going to go a little deeper. Cognizant of time, I'm going to make a kind of protracted introduction here, but just please join me in welcoming to the stage from TIP Chief Marketing Officer Eugina Jordan, and with DISH, Mr. Jingyi Zhu.
Celebrities, don't we? Huh? Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Welcome, everyone. I'm Eugina Jordan. I'm the new CMO, 6 weeks in the job of TIP, and I want to welcome you to this session, and ORAN Alliance will present first.
Great. And today, it was supposed to be two pretty ladies, Eugina and Dr. E from China Mobile. However, Dr. E, for personal reasons, she cannot attend. And I'm standing in for her, and we're delighted to tell you what exactly ORAN Alliance do. But yes, ORAN Alliance. And it's O-RAN. And in the early days, there's some confusion about, is this orange? No, it's not. It's O-RAN. It doesn't mean Open RAN. It doesn't mean anything else. Specifically, O-RAN Alliance. So, all right, and as Regina introduced, and we're going to give some little bit interview about ORAN Alliance overview. And ORAN is a global organization, and we are absolutely has members from all over the world. And specifically, we are filled with a bunch of extremely talented people, and many of them are from academics. Many of them from startups, and is full of talent. And ORAN is absolutely intended to be open. And we open to every member, every industry corner, and just to make sure, and if people are not aware, ORAN is also open to government agency also. And and ORAN is absolutely cloud-centric. And we are building our O-Cloud, and absolutely, and has a focus there. And of course, last but not the least, we are intent to build interoperable RAN solutions. We're trying to create the mission, transform the RAN, and from top to bottom. And many of those we have been doing that in the past 4 years, and 2018, and until now. And many of our specs has been transformed into products. And ORAN, and I like the words people use to call thrusts. And ORAN has 3 major area, and ORAN focused on develop specifications. And ORAN also not lose sight on the open source, and ORAN has a full open source community, and we're working with Linux Foundation, and as a matter of fact, the open source has yielded many results, and many of the academics and the products has been based on open source. And then last but not the least, ORAN has been giving a lot of attention to testing and integration, because due to the nature of open, and without testing and without certification, and we are not going to be able to accomplish our goal. And ORAN runs PlugFest, and the PlugFest across the globe, and we have North America and Europe as well as Asia. And DISH is proud to be one of the PlugFest sponsor together with AT&T. And in detail, and the activities includes, and we develop specifications. and also you can call it standards. And along with the standards and the test specifications are also generated, and as soon as the standards being completed. And the badging and the certification process is also very aggressive, and DISH has recently issued 2 certificates and to certain company. And the OSC and the community is also very much thriving. And last but not the least, we do pay attention to productization and to give planning and release planning and MVP features. So with all that, and ORAN is being full-fledged, fully engaged, and to accomplish the goal we have set out for, to completely transform the RAN community and for next generation to come. Now I'm handing over to my partner, Eugina.
Thank you so much. This was great. Okay, green button goes. Okay, so if you leave this session with one thing, I want you to leave with knowing what TIP does. So, we enable the community, vendors, operators, system integrators. We are now 650 members strong. We're also an accelerator. So this morning I did a panel with Orange, Telefonica, DT, and they told me on that panel that TIP helps them accelerate commercial deployments. I'm also talking to vendors like NSC. Congratulations on certifying 1224 ribbons. Well done. Well done. We also facilitate. We're a global organization. And without the community, we cannot change this industry. So if we look at the next slide, this is TIP in action. We work across many project groups to get operator requirements and then put them in the release roadmap. Why? Because it is important that what TIP does meets the market requirements. We're not here to do science projects. As vendors, what do you want? You want your solutions to be deployed. As a mobile operator, you want the solutions that work. That's where test and validation comes in. And then, today we launched our new marketplace. TIP gives your product a stamp of approval. Mobile operators get the confidence that the product, the solution, is going to work. And of course, we enable ecosystem development, TIP Academy. Make sure you join the happy hour this evening. And after the happy hour, there will be a very exciting announcement coming from TIP Academy. So make sure to watch our social media channels. And obviously, TIP marketing and advocacy. We're here to help our members to get their deployment stories, their successes out in the marketplace. What started as an idea in 2016 now is being deployed across the globe, thanks to TIP. That's a case study from Indonesia. Well done, the whole community. Amazing work. Look at the core community, supply ecosystem. It takes a village. Another one, Build in India. They had a session earlier this morning. Amazing portfolio of products that are ready to be deployed. And now I'm going to hand it over to my partners in crime, David. And I forgot, yes. Awesome, thank you.
Oh, great. David.
Great, thank you very much, Eugina and Jingyi. I think Ian and I are here to discuss in our session, there's obviously been lots of discussions about how do ORAN and TIP work together, what do they do, are there overlapping principles? And we're here to kind of clarify. We've heard what each organization does separately, and we're here to clarify how we actually work together. I mean, it should be known both TIP and ORAN Alliance have had a liaison agreement in place for a number of years now. I think it's about 4 years.
That's right.
But I think it's time that we show exactly what we do individually.
Sure. Maybe a brief introduction. I don't think you want to introduce yourself real quick, David?
Sure. My name's David Hutton, and I'm the Chief Engineer of the Telecom Infra project.
Yep. I'm Ian Wong. I work for Viavi Solutions. My day job is with the ORAN Alliance. I've had the test and integration focus group and also some next generation research.
And this is why we're a double act today, because Ian keeps telling me what I need to say. So why don't we jump straight into it? Ian, do you want to lead off on this?
Sure. So again, like as you will see in these slides, it really shows you how complementary TIP and ORAN are, right? I think we've heard some feedback in the community. Okay, what does TIP do? What does ORAN do? How does it come together? Really there are 4 activities that are the main thrust really of both organizations. Blueprints and release roadmap. We saw a little bit of that from Eugina. Specifications and requirements. That's at the heart of what we do. Labs and results sharing. Right? And finally, certificates and badges. So in the next few slides, we're going to go through, for each of these areas, how TIP and ORAN can work together.
Yeah. And I think if you would have heard, and I'm sure you're all in the keynote opening yesterday in the Open RAN Summit, you would have heard Dr. Alex Choi and Yago Tenorio talking about, in a high-level perspective, what each organization does. From building, I think, Jingyi, you were talking about redeveloping the RAN in terms of new architectures, new interfaces from a standards-based approach, and testing that as well. And from the TIP side of things, we know that standards takes you to a certain place, but then we need to move on and look at adding additional things on top of that, such as coverage, capacity, power requirements, all the other things that operators have been doing on a bilateral basis for many, many years before disaggregation. When you come to a disaggregated world, it becomes a lot more difficult to do it. So a community-based approach is what TIP is really focusing on, driving and accelerating into market, as Eugina was talking about. So let's go into each one of these individually, right?
Let's do it.
So I think I can lead off on this one. So TIP is starting off by, as Eugina says, looking at what operators' priorities are. What do they need in the market? Open RAN is a big, big space, and there's lots of areas that we can cover. But if we try to do everything at once, you're going to be boiling the ocean, and you're not going to be having the impact. So after the standards are complete, whether they be from ORAN Alliance or 3GPP or others, it's always a good idea to reflect what the market demands are. So we poll our operator community and says, right, what deployment scenarios are you interested in deploying Open RAN for? Is it indoor small cells? Is it outdoor macro? If it's outdoor macro, is it in an urban environment or is it in a rural environment? Because each one of these has certain different aspects on what the architecture you're going to need to support it, what interfaces and features that you're going to need to have, and we actually profile that within blueprint definition, and that's the starting point of where we define our journey.
That's great. And then from the ORAN standpoint, as you know, we kind of, on the ORAN side, create a lot of specifications. So a key aspect of that is polling our operators to prioritize what features are really needed, and we put that around what we call MVPs, or minimum viable plans. These are feature packages and the roadmap of releases. So it gives an indication of really where the specs are going, and kind of gives you a holistic view of where they're going. And for TIP and ORAN, we're really committed to make sure that this blueprints and MVPs are always aligned continuously, right? And that's going to be done on a regular basis. Basically, about 3 times a year, we've committed to kind of meet both groups together to make sure that we are never going to be out of sync.
Exactly. So the new feature packages that are being defined and specified within ORAN will be fed back into their baseline specifications and their test specifications, and that will be reflected and adopted within the TIP framework of productization as well.
That's right. So I can lead off on this one. As you mentioned, ORAN, we're really, really focused on technical and test specifications. And from the TIP side?
From the TIP side, as Yaga was talking about, it's really looking at making things RFI ready at this point. So it's actually defining similar RFI content, including adoption of which technical specifications of interfaces need to be part of that product requirement document, but also things like coverage and capacity, throughput, energy efficiency, security requirements, building up that list of what each individual product needs to support, but also what the whole system needs to support as well. And where possible, we will absolutely reference the baseline technical specifications that ORAN Alliance are generating, not just from the product requirements, but for the test plan aspects as well. And this, I think, is a key area that we'll probably get to in a later slide in terms of how ORAN and TIP are doing and adding value, complementary value on the testing side of things. We'll leave that to a little bit later.
That's correct, and absolutely. And I think one thing that's really important is, as you know, a lot of companies are members of both TIP and ORAN, and we're really relying on folks that are active in TIP to come back to ORAN and help us improve our specs through the change request process.
Absolutely. Okay, so labs and results sharing. So within TIP, we have, I think it's about 18 different community labs around the world. And these are global. These are in North America. These are in Latin America. We have labs in Europe, and we have labs in Asia Pacific. You would have seen some of the case studies that Eugina just showed from TIP have taken place in our TIP community labs. A lot of the community labs are hosted by Tier 1 operators, such as Orange, who I can see directly there. But we also have labs that are hosted by community organizations like Cable Labs, for instance. People who specialize in testing, and I believe we're also an OTIC. We also have adopted different strategies of looking at universities and academic institutions hosting labs, so that it's not just about doing the testing, it's also about doing the training to educate and upskill, not just the students, but the whole community as well.
And then from the ORAN standpoint, you've probably heard of what OTICs are, Open Test Integration Centers. We have 7 officially around the world now, spread around the world. And we also host a lot of plug fests, mostly in these OTICs, or sometimes actually outside of them, maybe for would-be OTICs. And I think the key here really, David, is the mutual result sharing is absolutely critical, and we've heard this feedback. TIP essentially references ORAN test specifications, and for example, in the latest RU product test plan, the entire working group for conformance test is referenced. So if I perform a test in a TIP community lab, why do I need to repeat it in an OTIC, and vice versa? Yeah. So I think this commitment is, say, test it once in either lab, and there's going to be mutual recognition on the other lab. I think that allows the full benefit of the badges that we will talk about a little bit later.
Exactly. It's harmonizing how testing is doing, not duplicating it. We have to realize that we're generating a new community here of people who are contributing into Open RAN. A lot of the vendors are smaller sized vendors, and their resources are absolutely stretched. So to ask them to repeat testing over and over again defeats the purpose. And it's part of why both organizations have generated these lab environments. The way that testing has happened in the past is on a bilateral basis. I'm an operator. I want to make sure I get equipment into my lab, and I'm going to test that for my capability set. And each operator does exactly the same thing, and that stretches the vendor ecosystem quite drastically. And it's fragile for the community that we have at the moment. So centralizing testing in this fashion, sharing the results with the community, is a bit of a change of mindset, but this adds more value and helps to accelerate into market on both what TIP does and what ORAN Alliance does.
For sure. And finally, certificates and badges, right? On the ORAN side, as some of you may know, we talked about 3 different types of test specs: conformance, interoperability, and end-to-end. Similarly, for vendors that come into the OTICs, they can actually get official ORAN, OTIC certified, or OTIC interoperable, or ORAN OTIC end-to-end tested badges, showing the maturity of their products, in terms of adherence to the technical specifications.
Yeah, exactly. And from our side, we're doing testing based on our product specifications, or not specifications, our product requirements that we have set and agreed, which of course are still based on a lot of what ORAN have defined in terms of their interfaces. But putting that together in terms of a complete system solution, which is what we call blueprints, and make sure that we're doing that system type of testing as well, which is really trying to prove a level of maturity and promoting and trying to accelerate commercial scale for Open RAN. So this type of testing is really important as well. I think there's a lot of interoperability, integration, and some system testing that ORAN Alliance are doing. We're also looking at commercial grade level testing to prove performance, reliability, resilience, everything that an operator would generally do within their lab environment. Now, let's be clear, we're not saying that we're going to do all the testing for all the operators in the world and that the operators won't do any testing themselves. Everybody knows that each particular operator environment, their networks are not the same. Even within a single group, they are slightly different. But if we can solve and centralize the testing between both of our organizations to perform a baseline of 80 to 90% of the testing that every single operator is trying to perform, that reduces that load for every single operator around the world if we can centralize that. That helps to save time, that helps to save resource, and that accelerates into market as well. And then the operators can concentrate on the particular type of testing for their specific environment to get into their market as well.
Absolutely, and I think in the next few slides, we're actually going to dive a little bit deeper into this specific topic, because I think this is where the details matter for our vendor community out there, and so we're going to attempt to kind of go through that. I mean, still at a high level, so we can always kind of reach out to both organizations for more details. But at a high level, ORAN testing and validation really follows this train. You start, again, baseline technical specifications. These are normative specs, key aspects of the ORAN architecture. For example, the interfaces are developed. And as you may know, very recently, ORAN has pushed the front haul specs into the ETSI process. So officially ETSI standards now, and it's a big milestone for ORAN, and you can expect to see more specs follow that model of going into ETSI being officially a standard. From there, you go into also normative test specifications, right? With normative technical, you need the test. How do I test that vendor's equipment truly follow the ORAN specs? And again, we talked about conformance. I followed the spec. Interoperability, a pair of equipment actually can talk to each other with a predefined set of profiles with some amount of configurability, but it gives you a lot of confidence that conformance gives you a baseline, right? I already do what is absolutely mandatory, what's minimal. Interoperability knows that my pair of equipment really works together. And finally, end-to-end is kind of the true test, right? I've formed the entire network. I'm going to do functional, security, performance tests on them. The next is the OTIC step, right? After I've done all these tests, I want an official stamp of approval from ORAN. I go run OTIC, conduct those tests in the OTIC manner. That way it's officially recorded, and then ORAN, through the OTIC, can award a certification, an interoperability badge, or an end-to-end badge.
Yeah, excellent. So, and this is the TIP process, and I think it begins after what Ian has just talked about. And let's kind of be clear that this kind of format of development and R&D development, it's not necessarily specific to disaggregation. It's how things have been running in the past, right? Standards are necessary to make things interoperable. Before disaggregation, that's how we have, we all have phones, we can all connect to each other around the world, and we have global roaming, and it's fantastic. So we have the standards, and we have testing based on those standards to make sure that we can have a multi-vendor type of deployment. And even in the old, the traditional model beforehand, that wasn't the end of things. That, you can't take those and put them directly into network and turn the on switch and everything works perfectly. There's a process after that that, in the traditional model happened on a bilateral basis to kind of say, this is what I want as an operator, and the vendor would say, well, frankly, this is what you're going to get. And there would be a little bit of back and forth in terms of the definition of what the product would actually look like and support. And then the testing would take place in that individual operator's lab environment. Now, in a disaggregated world, that becomes very, very complex because you're looking at a completely new vendor ecosystem and a multitude of different vendors. It's not just one that you need to go out and perform this exercise with, which is why we're centralizing that process in the first step. And that's why the first badge here, the bronze badge, is vendors are responding to the product requirements that we have and saying, I am compliant to those. It doesn't involve any tests at that point, but it's validating that there is a product there. And that's an RFI-ready product. The next step is actually, and Christian Toivo, our executive director, was talking about this slide in the opening of the summit this morning, is test that in a controlled environment. And that could be in a TIP community lab, it could be a third-party authorized lab or an operator lab environment, doing product and solution-based testing. The next stage is based on the commercial grade aspects that we were talking about, covering those things of performance, resilience, reliability, security, energy efficiency, and making sure that we build trust and confidence within the operator community that when a gold badge has been issued, they can lift and shift that full system configuration, which includes the configuration of how these components plug in together, the parameters, and that is shown on our TIP exchange. So you should be able to lift and shift that into your network and concentrate on your own 10% of testing that you need to do, rather than if we carry on in the traditional model and every operator bringing in equipment into their labs, it takes a lot of time to aggregate. So if we can centralize that, solve the integration and the interoperability issues together, then we accelerate really into market.
And diving a bit deeper, so we've kind of worked together, pretty closely and say, for a vendor, what am I to do, right? So this is the recommended path of both ORAN and TIP for single product testing. First, we expect, of course, vendors implement and self-verify using ORAN and 3GPP, both technical and test specs, which a lot of you know are actually open, right? And then on the ORAN path on the left, it's an option, okay, but it's a highly recommended option. It's for the product to acquire an ORAN certificate based on the conformance test specs in an actual OTIC. That way you can get an official ORAN stamp of approval. My interface for this product is indeed certified. And that leads into confidence from an operator standpoint that the product is compliant with the ORAN technical specs.
Yep. And the path on the right-hand side of the screen, again, is testing against those product requirements that are on top of the kind of the standards-based interfaces. So things like if you have an RU, does it conform to the spectrum bands that have been defined within that product document? Does it conform to the power requirements that we have? And it's also a good thing to develop these product requirements because it indicates to the vendor ecosystem what their own internal R&D should be focused on, because they know that these are focused from operators and their requirements, and that helps to accelerate their own R&D into market as well. So if you will look at the end goal at the bottom here, is, for instance, you would have an RU that has conformed to the front haul interface specification that supports the frequency bands that TIP has defined for that particular version of the document, that conforms to power requirements and is really ready for market.
That's right. And at the heart of this is we can't emphasize these enough, right? The test results and reports sharing, across these labs, right? Take the RU, for example. Let's say I've done my working group 4 conformance test for the front haul in an OTIC. All those test results can be reused and you don't need to rerun them in the TIP community lab and vice versa. Again, vendors that are members of both, we highly encourage you all to actually get both, because at the end of the day, both really signifies the highest confidence for an operator.
And the other thing that I think we probably missed out when we were talking about community labs and OTICs is that there are labs out there that are both.
That's correct.
which is a great thing because it means that we can do both of the tests at the same time in the same facility and get both the ORAN certificate and the TIP badge at the same time.
That's correct. So the next slide is for now groups of products or product combinations. Again, very similar flow. Vendors are, you implemented, you self-verified your interoperability this time, and or end-to-end functionality using the public ORAN and 3GPP test specs. Again, in ORAN, there's not two options, but two levels, right? One is interoperability test. Usually, this is across an interface. The product combination can acquire an IoT badge or interoperability test badge in a NOTIC. And if it's a group of vendors can also go to NOTIC to get an end-to-end badge, which shows that it passes the functional and security requirements according to the ORAN end-to-end test specs. And of course, that leading to confidence. Again, the product combination has been implemented in accordance with the ORAN specifications.
Yeah. And again, on the right-hand side of thing, TIP is really focusing on that system build and the testing related to that against the operator-defined blueprints, which reflects the deployment scenario. So there's a definitive channel to market for vendors to come through this process. And the system testing is really important. I think it has to be operator-driven. We would love to get to the point at the end of the journey, because Open RAN is a journey, but we have to be pragmatic and realistic and take things step at a time. We would like to ultimately get to the point where everything is plug and play, interchangeable components, and everything is completely interoperable. But from a system perspective, if we're going to really accelerate this market and the demands that we have now and the timeframes that we have now, we need to start looking at what are the priority system builds and the stacks that the operators are looking to deploy and focus on those to start off with. And then also in parallel to that, look at more bespoke and completely interchangeable type of testing. So that's what the blueprints reflect, and that's what goes on to our exchange.
Great. And again, similarly, test results sharing, and vendors are encouraged to get all of them. Gives you, it's just like being a Boy Scout, and you want to get as many badges as you can, so you can be an Eagle Scout, right? I don't know if that translates well, but that's the best analogy I can think of.
I never made it to Eagle.
Okay, no, I never made it past Cub Scout, so that's even worse. Anyway, so let's summarize. So in summary, again, ORAN and TIP, really we're fully committed to realize the vision of open, intelligent, virtualized, and fully interoperable RAN. I would say if there's anything you can take out from this session and from this conference, is that both organizations are truly fully committed to this vision.
Absolutely, and we are working together. We have been for a while, but I would say over the last probably year and a half, 2 years, the relationship has grown. It's become more formalized, and that's what we want to communicate to you all during this week. So we want you to leave the whole Fyuz event understanding what are the benefits of each organization. There are benefits definitely for both, and when you plug them together, that's how you can really accelerate the complete Open RAN industry. And we're also available for offline discussions as well. But I think what we have coming up is a really exciting panel discussion whereby it's not necessarily you and I who are advocating it, but it's actually going to be the consumers who are talking about why ORAN and TIP are important.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to Sean.
Right. Thank you.
I'd like to invite